Hey guys, Mr. Ridgway here for our next lesson, Savage Southern Slave Owners. Go ahead, get logged into Pear Deck to get started with the lesson, and then there's a question that we have for our warm-up here. How would you define slavery in just 4 words? Again, this could be things you might know about it, or just a simple definition. So how would you define it in 4 words? Once you've logged into Pear Deck, and then when you're ready, go ahead, carry along with me to the rest of the lesson. So what are we trying to achieve here? A whole bunch of things. Okay, this is our main lesson where we really dive into the world of colonial slavery in the South. So with that, I'm hoping that you can explain the diversity of slavery in the colonial South and the different forms and varied kind of types that it kind of took on. And then we're also going to describe the Southern plantation and yeoman economy, which is kind of a part of that. And then last but not least, analyzing the role of honor in the social fabric of Southern society. So with that all being said, let's kind of carry on and talk about what we're going to do. First, I'd like you to watch this John Green video here and then respond on Pear Deck. What is wrong, or what maybe needs to be added, taken away from Patterson's definition of slavery from what we learned last class about slavery. We talked about some things called agency and stuff like that, which should give you a little bit of a hint. Once you've done that, we've got some controversy readings that you're going to be doing here. And this is especially with something called Padlet. Okay, so because slavery is such a unique and when it shows up in the Americas, a extremely diverse, diversely, in terms of how it manifests, it's just very, very diverse and very, very complex. There are some different readings that we're going to do here. Okay, so the instructions are right there. You're going to click the button below to, first of all, read each particular reading. And then there's a Padlet that goes along with it. On the Padlet is where you respond to the prompts, okay, that are from each particular reading. Now, please make sure you tag your post on each Padlet with your first and last name so that I can give you credit for your work. And just be aware that with these questions, there are no definitive right or wrong answers. You can, because you are going to see your peers' comments, you can challenge them, you can confirm them, you can engage in a discussion, tag them with the @ symbol when you're trying to specifically talk to somebody. The whole point here is that we're trying to engage with these difficult concepts rather than simply just provide a single sentence solution. Okay. Once you've done that, then I want you to make sure that you write this T-chart down on your particular notes. There's a couple of things here that I will explain as well. So there's a link here that takes you on a virtual tour of Monticello, which is Thomas Jefferson's plantation that he owned. And we're just going to use his house as an example of what it was like to be a planter class. And I'll explain what that was here in a second. And then right here is a link to yeoman, which is the yeoman or, sandhill farmers. You'd hear a bunch of different names for them. And that was the other group of whites in the South. So I'm going to actually take a moment here, just step aside and actually explain what these things are. Okay, so in the South, there are 2 different kind of classes. Okay, and it kind of reflects what we talked about Virginia early on. There's a planter class, and then there's this poor white / yeoman kind of class there. Now, what about who are these planters? They are going to be, we're going to define a planter in this class as anybody who owned more than 15 slaves. Okay, they would often in their own times refer to themselves as gentlemen, which meant they were a man of property. They did not work with their hands. The thing that you need to understand about these guys, because they are guys, is they are a vast minority. Okay, which is a weird way of saying that. They're a definite minority of whites. But the thing is, though, even though they're a minority of the Southern whites, they own a majority of the South slaves, which kind of tells you that, some of these people own plantations that have literally just thousands of slaves, or they, own multiple plantations that do. But then on the other hand, we have this yeoman class, and these are the not planters of the South. They are poor whites. In some cases, they are landowning. In some cases, not. Typically, these would represent probably the non-slaveholding class, although they might own a few slaves and maybe it would just be periodically. Like when times are really, really good, these yeomen might purchase one or two to use for a season, but then maybe times get really rough and they have to sell them, again, for all the destructive consequences that go along with slavery. So again, ownership is going to kind of wax and wane depending on their particular financial success. Just be aware that, and Bertram Wyatt Brown will talk about this in the video, that together planters and yeomen represent, again, if they do own slaves, only about 1/3 of whites in the South actually had some kind of toehold in slave ownership at that time. The other 2/3 are going to be from this poor white farmers that are not slave owning. So once you've gotten that T-chart done, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up by finishing out our mini lesson and then talking about our plus stuff reading that we have to do at the very end of this thing. So we are going to introduce what Southern honor is and this idea. So how is human behavior shaped by society and vice versa? You're going to see here, society is in some cases shaped by behavior. But what you need to understand is that early on, okay, the South in colonial, all the way up through the antebellum time periods, which is to the Civil War and even after, the South operates off of a different ethical system than many of its middle colony / northern counterparts. And this is because they are going to operate off of a system called honor. The North is not going to do that. Eventually, the North is going to develop another alternative idea of what's the proper way to behave. And that is this idea of a conscience that lives inside your head, the whole Jiminy Cricket thing, right? The South, this whole honor thing is a very, very different answer. Now, it is like a language is kind of the way that I can best kind of explain it to you. All social classes in the South are going to operate through this ethical system, but it is especially evident in the upper classes or the genteel classes, those gentlemen that we were kind of referring to earlier. So what is this thing? Well, honor is probably the best word that we have for it today is it was about your reputation. Okay, so Kenneth Greenberg, who we'll be reading here shortly, he has a quote here. You project yourself through how you look and what you say. You're treated honorably when your projections are respected and are accepted as true. Okay, so in terms of what's determining what's right or wrong in society or what's wrong for you to do, it's all about how your reputation is going to be at stake. So, for example, you could lie as much as you wanted to in the South, and again, that wasn't wrong. But the thing that could not happen is you could not have other people accuse you of lying, because at that point, then your reputation is at stake. And that's why, for example, doing stuff like tweaking a man's nose, which is grabbing a man's nose and pulling it, was seen as like unmasking this projection, that this front that he had, and basically like making fun of his most like outward part of his face. So doing that was essentially like giving somebody the middle finger, back in, probably worse, back in Southern colonial times. We'll talk more about how slavery interacted with honor. It is literally more, death before dishonor. It's more important than life. Your reputation was everything. Now, I know this is a very weird, odd way to think that you can do whatever you want to as long as your, reputation is intact. It's a very different kind of ethical system than what we think of today, which is like this morally like conscious in our head, right and wrong. You can see that kind of certain ethical systems have gone on and died out. So where do you think, though, we might still have this ethical system of honor today? Go ahead, write me a picture in Pear Deck. And once you do that, there's a little something here we're going to finish off with. And one of the most probably the highest moment in which honor was at stake is when something had to occur called a duel. And this was a way for men to, and I say men because men were the only ones allowed to duel, to restore their honor if it had been challenged or besmirched. So I've got a clip here from Hamilton called the 10 Duel Commandments that I'd like you to check out. Okay, and it talks all about dueling. It's really, really cool. Once you do that, let's talk about this next book we're going to be doing. So we're going to be reading a book called Honor and Slavery by Kenneth Greenberg. I think I messed one of those things up. Kenneth Greenberg. It is extremely insightful for understanding how the American South works. So please make sure you are keeping up with your course map, because we're going to start reading this thing. It's our first full book we're actually going to read. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.